Before we begin this sacred and urgent conversation, I need you to subscribe to this channel and listen carefully to every word until the very end. Turn off all distractions, close every other window, silence your phone completely. What you're about to hear could save your spiritual life, redirect your destiny, and restore the intimate relationship we once shared. My beloved child, you're trusting the wrong voice, and I'm calling you back to me. Back to my voice, back to my heart, back to the only voice that has ever truly known you, loved you, and spoken truth over your life. I see you there, confused by the chaos of competing voices that surround your life like a storm. I watch you strain to hear direction through the noise of opinions, advice, fears, and pressures that bombard your mind every day. I observe you trying to navigate your future by listening to voices that don't know your destiny, don't understand your calling, and have never seen the plans I have prepared for your life. You've been trusting voices that sound confident but lack authority, that speak loudly but lack truth, that offer direction but lead to dead ends. The voice you've been trusting sounds so reasonable, so practical, so wise by human standards. It speaks the language of common sense, cultural acceptance, and safe choices. It warns you against risks, counsels you toward conformity, and guides you away from anything that might require faith, challenge normalcy, or demand that you trust in something beyond what you can see and understand. This voice has convinced you that its limitations are wisdom, its fears are protection, and its smallness is safety. But my child, this voice you've been following is not my voice. It doesn't carry my heart, it doesn't reflect my nature, and it doesn't lead to my purposes for your life. It's a voice that keeps you small when I created you for greatness, that keeps you safe when I designed you for significance, that keeps you comfortable when I called you to transformation, that changes not just your life, but the lives of everyone you're assigned to influence. I know how this happened. In moments of pain, disappointment, and uncertainty, other voices seemed more immediate, more tangible, more responsive to your need for quick answers and easy solutions. When my voice required you to wait, they offered instant gratification. When my path demanded faith, they provided logical alternatives. When my direction required trust in the unseen, they gave you visible options that seemed more reliable, more manageable, more under your control. These wrong voices gained your trust gradually, through repeated patterns of offering you shortcuts around the character development I was doing in your life, alternatives to the patience I was teaching you, and substitutes for the deep dependence on me I was cultivating in your spirit. They promised you could have breakthrough without process, victory without battle, promotion without preparation. They offered you my blessings without my presence, my gifts without my guidance, my promises without my partnership. The wrong voice you've been trusting might be the voice of fear that speaks louder than my peace, telling you all the reasons why you should worry, all the possibilities for disaster, all the ways things could go wrong. This voice has convinced you that anxiety is wisdom, that stress is responsibility, that worry is love. But fear is not my voice, my child. I don't speak in trembles and panic. I speak in still small whispers that bring calm to chaos and peace to storms. Perhaps you've been trusting the voice of comparison that constantly measures your life against others, your progress against their timeline, your blessings against their advantages. This voice tells you that you're behind, insufficient, lacking something essential that others possess. It creates dissatisfaction with my unique plan for your life by convincing you that everyone else's journey is better than yours. But comparison is not my voice. I don't speak through envy or inadequacy. I speak identity, calling, and divine purpose that makes your journey incomparable to any other. Maybe you've been trusting the voice of past failure that reminds you of every mistake, every disappointment, every time you fell short of expectations. This voice tells you that your history determines your future, that your failures define your potential, that your past mistakes disqualify you from future blessings. It keeps you trapped in cycles of shame, regret, and limitation. But condemnation is not my voice. I don't speak through guilt and shame. I speak through redemption, restoration, and new beginnings that make all things new. You might be trusting the voice of human approval that makes other people's opinions more important than my approval. Their acceptance more valuable than my acceptance. Their validation more necessary than my validation. This voice keeps you performing, pleasing, and pretending to be someone you're not, in order to gain acceptance from people whose approval cannot give you what only my acceptance can provide. But people-pleasing is not my voice. I don't speak through the need for human validation. I speak through divine affirmation that establishes your worth independent of any human opinion. Or perhaps you've been trusting the voice of religious tradition that has wrapped my love in layers of rules, regulations, and restrictions that make relationship with me feel like burden rather than blessing, duty rather than delight, obligation rather than opportunity. This voice has convinced you that I'm hard to please, difficult to approach, and disappointed in your performance. But religious burden is not my voice. I don't speak through guilt, manipulation, or spiritual exhaustion. I speak through grace, freedom, and the joy of intimate relationship. The tragedy is that while you've been listening to these wrong voices, you've been missing my voice, the voice that knows your name, calls you beloved, and speaks your destiny with clarity, love, and unshakable truth. My voice is the one that called you before you were born, that has been guiding your steps even when you didn't recognize my direction, that has been working all things together for your good, even when circumstances seem to contradict my goodness. My voice is different from all the others because it carries the authority of the one who created you, the love of the one who redeemed you, and the wisdom of the one who knows your end from your beginning. When I speak, confusion becomes clarity, chaos becomes peace, and uncertainty becomes unshakable confidence in my faithfulness. My voice doesn't just give you information, it gives you transformation. It doesn't just provide direction, it provides the power to follow that direction successfully. I'm calling you back to my voice because the wrong voices you've been trusting are leading you away from everything I have prepared for your life. They're guiding you toward lesser versions of yourself, smaller dreams than I've planted in your heart, safer paths than the adventure I've designed for your journey. They're directing you toward destinations that will leave you unfulfilled, unchallenged, and unable to impact the world the way I created you to influence it. The time has come for you to recognize which voice has been influencing your decisions, shaping your expectations, and determining your direction. The season has arrived for you to distinguish between voices that sound wise but lack divine wisdom, that appear caring but create spiritual confusion, that seem helpful but hinder your heavenly calling. I'm not calling you back to condemnation, but to clarity. Not to judgment, but to joy, not to burden, but to the freedom that comes from following the voice that truly knows the way you should go. I'm calling you back to the voice that speaks life when others speak death, hope when others speak despair, possibility when others speak limitation. Come back to my voice, my child. Come back to the source of all truth, all love, all wisdom, and all direction. Come back to the voice that has never led you astray, never given you false information, never guided you toward anything that wasn't ultimately for your good and my glory. The wrong voice has had its season of influence. Now it's time for the right voice, my voice, to have its rightful place in your heart and your decision-making. Come back to me. My precious child, I need you to understand something crucial about the spiritual atmosphere in which you live. It's filled with voices, all competing for your attention, your trust, and your allegiance. These voices don't just whisper suggestions. They actively compete for the authority to shape your thoughts, guide your decisions, and determine your destiny. Right now, some of these competing voices have gained more influence in your life than my voice, and this competition has created confusion, misdirection, and spiritual interference with the plans I have for your future. The first competing voice that has been vying for your trust is the voice of immediate gratification that promises quick solutions, instant results, and shortcuts to breakthrough. This voice cannot tolerate waiting, despises process, and offers alternatives to the patience and persistence that genuine transformation requires. It whispers that you shouldn't have to endure seasons of development, that breakthrough should come without process, that my blessings should manifest without the character formation necessary to steward them properly. This voice of instant satisfaction has convinced you that delayed answers mean denied prayers, that process equals punishment, that waiting indicates I'm not hearing you or caring about your situation. It has trained you to interpret my timing as rejection, my seasons as abandonment, my development processes as evidence that something is wrong with your faith or your relationship with me. The second competing voice is the voice of worldly wisdom that sounds intelligent, practical, and reasonable, but operates from earthly understanding rather than heavenly revelation. This voice speaks the language of human logic, natural limitation, and conventional thinking. It counsels you to make decisions based on what makes sense to human reasoning rather than what I've revealed to your spirit. It judges opportunities by earthly standards rather than divine possibilities. This worldly voice has gained influence by offering you alternatives to faith that seem more reliable, more predictable, more under your control. It suggests that trusting what you can see is wiser than trusting what I've promised, that following proven formulas is safer than following my specific leading, that conventional paths are more secure than the unique journey I've designed for your life. The third competing voice is the voice of cultural conformity that pressures you to fit in, blend in, and go along with whatever everyone else is doing. This voice speaks through social pressure, peer expectations, and the fear of being different, unusual, or misunderstood. It convinces you that acceptance from others is more valuable than approval from me, that belonging to human groups is more important than belonging to my kingdom. This conformity voice has been particularly loud in areas where my calling on your life requires you to stand out, stand up, or stand apart from cultural norms. It has whispered that you should tone down your faith, minimize your expectations, reduce your testimony, and avoid doing anything that might make others uncomfortable with their own spiritual complacency or lack of breakthrough. The fourth competing voice is the voice of past experience that interprets everything through the lens of what has happened before rather than what I'm making possible now. This voice insists that your future will be determined by your history, that patterns from your past will automatically repeat in your present, that limitations you've experienced before will continue to limit you forever. This backwards-looking voice has gained authority by convincing you that experience is more trustworthy than faith, that history is more reliable than my promises, that established patterns are more powerful than my ability to create new realities in your life. It keeps you trapped in cycles of limitation by making your past more influential than my power to transform your future. The fifth competing voice is the voice of human opinion that makes other people's thoughts, judgments, and expectations more important than my perspective on your life. This voice has convinced you that you need human approval to pursue my calling, human understanding to follow my direction, human validation to believe my promises about your future. This people-pleasing voice has gained influence by making you dependent on external validation rather than internal confirmation from my spirit. It has taught you to measure your worth by human standards rather than divine affirmation, to seek permission from people who have no authority over your destiny, to explain my calling to those who lack revelation about my purposes for your life. The sixth competing voice is the voice of religious performance that has convinced you that my love is conditional, my acceptance is earned, and my blessings are rewards for good behavior. This voice speaks through guilt, shame, and spiritual exhaustion. It makes relationship with me feel like work rather than rest, burden rather than blessing, obligation rather than invitation. This performance-driven voice has gained influence by mixing truth with error, combining my grace with human effort, and creating a version of faith that depends more on your performance than my faithfulness. It has made you focus more on what you're doing for me than what I've done for you, more on earning my love than receiving my love. The seventh competing voice is the voice of discouragement that specializes in amplifying problems, magnifying obstacles, and minimizing possibilities. This voice gains volume during difficult seasons, challenging circumstances, and delayed breakthroughs. It interprets delays as denials, obstacles as stop signs, and challenges as evidence that you are on the wrong path. This discouraging voice has gained influence by offering seemingly reasonable explanations for why things aren't working out, why breakthrough is taking so long, why others seem to receive answers while you continue waiting. It has convinced you that prolonged challenges mean I've forgotten about you, that continued obstacles indicate you've misheard my voice. What makes these competing voices particularly dangerous is that they often contain partial truth, mixed with complete deception. They sound wise because they incorporate some accurate information. They appear caring because they express concern for your well-being. They seem helpful because they offer solutions to immediate problems. But partial truth mixed with deception is more dangerous than obvious lies because it's harder to recognize and resist. These competing voices have also gained authority in your life by speaking more frequently, more loudly, and more urgently than my voice. They create noise and pressure that makes it difficult for you to hear my still small voice. They demand immediate response while my voice often requires quiet reflection, patient listening, and faithful waiting for full understanding. The competition between these voices and my voice is not neutral. It's warfare for your soul, your destiny, and your relationship with me. Every voice you trust that is not my voice pulls you away from my purposes, plans, and presence. Every decision you make based on voices other than mine leads you down paths I never intended you to walk. But I want you to know that my voice is stronger than all competing voices combined. My truth is more powerful than their deception. My love is more compelling than their fear. My wisdom is more reliable than their confusion. My direction is more trustworthy than their misdirection. The time has come for you to recognize these competing voices for what they are: distractions from my voice, alternatives to my authority, and substitutes for my supremacy in your life. The season has arrived for you to stop giving these voices the power to influence your decisions and start giving my voice the exclusive authority it deserves. I'm calling you back from the confusion of competing voices to the clarity of my single, clear, authoritative voice. Come back to the voice that speaks with the authority of heaven, the wisdom of eternity, and the love that will never fail you. The competition for your trust ends now. My voice wins. Come back to me. My beloved child, I need to help you understand how the wrong voice gained such powerful authority in your life. Because understanding the process will help you reverse it and restore my voice to its rightful place of supremacy in your heart and mind. The wrong voice didn't gain authority overnight, and it didn't announce its intention to replace my influence in your life. It gained authority gradually, strategically, and often through circumstances that seemed to justify giving it more credence than my voice. The wrong voice first gained authority through your pain. During seasons of hurt, disappointment, and unanswered questions, my voice seemed distant while other voices offered immediate comfort, quick explanations, and instant relief from emotional discomfort. When you cried out to me and didn't receive the immediate response you needed, other voices stepped in with solutions that seemed more accessible, more immediate, more responsive to your urgent need for relief. In those moments of vulnerability, you unconsciously began to associate my voice with delay and other voices with help. You started believing that I was slow to respond while other sources were quick to assist. You began trusting voices that offered immediate gratification over my voice that required patience, process, and trust in timing you couldn't understand. Pain created an opening for wrong voices to gain influence by positioning themselves as more reliable than my faithfulness. The wrong voice also gained authority through your disappointment with my timing. When breakthrough didn't come according to your schedule, when prayers seemed unanswered according to your timeline, When promises appeared delayed beyond your patience level, you began listening to voices that offered alternative explanations, backup plans, and different paths to the same destinations I had promised to lead you to. These voices convinced you that my timing was unreliable, that waiting for my direction was impractical, that trusting my process was naive. They offered you control over outcomes that I wanted you to surrender to my sovereignty. They provided explanations for delays that made sense to human reasoning, but contradicted the deeper work I was doing in your character, your faith, and your spiritual development. The wrong voice gained additional authority through your fear of risk. When my direction required you to step outside your comfort zone, trust in the unseen, or take actions that couldn't be guaranteed by human security, other voices offered safer alternatives that seemed more reasonable, more predictable, more under your control. They convinced you that faith-based decisions were reckless while fear-based decisions were wise. These fearful voices gained influence by offering you the illusion of security through human understanding, natural resources, and conventional wisdom. They made my voice seem impractical, my direction seem risky, my promises seem uncertain compared to alternatives that appeared more tangible, more immediate, more achievable through human effort alone. The wrong voice also gained authority through your need for human approval. When following my direction meant risking misunderstanding, criticism, or rejection from people whose acceptance you valued, other voices offered paths that would maintain human relationships at the expense of divine relationship. They convinced you that keeping people happy was more important than keeping me central in your decision-making. These approval-seeking voices gained power by making you dependent on external validation rather than internal confirmation from my spirit. They taught you to seek permission from people who had no authority over your destiny, to explain my calling to those who lacked revelation about my purposes, to modify my direction to fit other people's comfort levels with your spiritual journey. The wrong voice gained further authority through your intellectual pride. When my direction seemed simple, while other voices offered complex analysis, sophisticated reasoning, and impressive intellectual frameworks, you began to trust voices that appealed to your desire to appear wise, educated, and intellectually respectable. You started believing that faith should be defensible by human logic, that my leading should make sense to natural understanding. These intellectual voices gained influence by convincing you that trusting what you couldn't fully understand was weakness rather than faith, that following my simple directions was naivety rather than wisdom, that depending on my supernatural intervention was foolishness rather than the very essence of relationship with me. The wrong voice also gained authority through your comparison with others. When you observed people who seemed to receive answers faster, breakthrough sooner, or blessings more abundantly, other voices offered explanations that made their success seem more attainable through human methods than through faithful dependence on my unique timing and purposes for your life. These comparative voices gained power by convincing you that everyone else's journey was evidence of how your journey should unfold, that their timeline should be your timeline, that their methods should be your methods. They made you dissatisfied with my unique plan for your life by constantly measuring it against experiences that weren't designed for you. The wrong voice gained additional authority through your desire for immediate results. When my processes required seasons of development, preparation, and character formation, other voices offered shortcuts that promised the same outcomes without the same investment of time, faith, and patient endurance. They convinced you that you could have my blessings without my presence, my gifts without my guidance, my promises without my process. These impatient voices gained influence by making waiting seem wasteful, process seem punishment, and development seem unnecessary. They offered you the illusion that you could bypass the very experiences I was using to prepare you for the fullness of what I wanted to give you. Most significantly, the wrong voice gained authority through your gradual drift away from intimate communion with me. As you spent less time in my presence, my voice became less familiar, while other voices became more prominent. As you reduced time in prayer, worship, and meditation on my word, my voice became quieter while competing voices became louder. This spiritual drift created a vacuum that wrong voices rushed to fill. Without regular, intimate fellowship with me, you lost the ability to distinguish my voice from other voices. Without consistent exposure to my heart through worship and prayer, you became more susceptible to voices that sounded reasonable but lacked divine wisdom. The accumulation of all these factors, pain, disappointment, fear, need for approval, intellectual pride, comparison, impatience, and spiritual drift, created the perfect storm that allowed wrong voices to gain authority they were never meant to have in your life. These voices didn't take authority by force. You gradually gave them authority by trusting them more than trusting me. But understanding how wrong voices gained authority also reveals how that authority can be revoked and restored to me. Every way that wrong voices gained influence can be reversed through intentional choices to return trust, attention, and authority to my voice alone. The authority you gave away can be reclaimed, my child. The influence you granted to wrong voices can be redirected back to me. The trust you placed in unreliable sources can be restored to the most reliable source, my unfailing love, my unchanging character, and my unbreakable promises. It's time to revoke the authority that wrong voices have been exercising in your life and restore my voice to its rightful place of complete supremacy over your thoughts, decisions, and direction. Come back to me, and I will restore my voice to its rightful place of authority in your life. My precious child, there are always consequences when you trust the wrong voice, when you follow guidance that doesn't come from me, when you make decisions based on wisdom that lacks divine insight. These consequences aren't punishments. They're natural results of choosing paths I never intended you to walk, trusting sources I never authorized to guide you, and following directions that lead away from my purposes for your life. Today, I want to help you recognize these consequences so you can understand the urgent need to return to trusting my voice alone. The first consequence of trusting the wrong voice is chronic confusion about your direction. When you follow voices that contradict each other, offer conflicting advice, and pull you in different directions, you end up spiritually disoriented, emotionally scattered, and mentally overwhelmed by options that all sound reasonable but lead to different destinations. This confusion isn't just intellectual uncertainty. It's spiritual chaos that affects every decision you make. This directional confusion manifests as constant second-guessing of your choices, endless analysis of options without clear resolution, and the exhausting cycle of starting, stopping, and restarting various paths without ever reaching meaningful destinations. You find yourself asking the same questions repeatedly, seeking the same advice from multiple sources, and never feeling confident about the direction you're moving. The second consequence is diminished faith in my faithfulness. When wrong voices convince you to trust in human understanding, natural resources, and earthly security, your spiritual muscles of faith begin to atrophy. Your capacity to believe for supernatural intervention decreases, your expectation of miraculous breakthrough diminishes, and your confidence in my ability to provide solutions beyond human capability weakens. This faith diminishment shows up as reduced prayer life, lowered expectations of divine intervention, and increased dependence on human solutions for problems that require divine breakthrough. You stop believing for miracles because wrong voices have convinced you that natural explanations are more reliable than supernatural possibilities. The third consequence of wrong trust is spiritual anxiety that never resolves no matter how much you try to control circumstances through human effort. Wrong voices promise you peace through understanding, security through planning, and comfort through control. But they can never deliver the deep soul rest that comes only from trusting my sovereignty over every aspect of your life. This spiritual anxiety manifests as constant worry about outcomes you cannot control, obsessive planning for contingencies you cannot predict, and the exhausting effort to manage variables that are beyond human influence. You find yourself stressed about things you cannot change, anxious about futures you cannot guarantee, and fearful about possibilities you cannot prevent. The fourth consequence is stunted spiritual growth that keeps you operating at levels of maturity far below what I intended for your development at this stage of your journey. Wrong voices offer shortcuts around the character development, faith expansion, and spiritual strengthening that come through trusting me during challenging seasons, uncertain circumstances, and difficult processes. This stunted growth shows up as repeated patterns of immaturity in how you handle adversity, process disappointment, and respond to delays. You find yourself reacting to situations the same way you did years ago, struggling with the same fears that should have been overcome, and lacking the spiritual strength necessary for the assignments I want to give you. The fifth consequence of trusting wrong voices is missed opportunities that were designed to elevate your life, expand your influence, and accelerate your purpose. When wrong voices counsel caution over calling, safety over significance, and comfort over challenge, you pass by doors I opened specifically for your advancement, promotion, and breakthrough. These missed opportunities represent not just personal loss, but also loss for everyone you were meant to impact through the increased influence, expanded platform, and elevated position those opportunities would have provided. Your obedience to wrong voices doesn't just limit you. It limits everyone you were assigned to bless through your breakthrough. The sixth consequence is damaged relationships with people I placed in your life to support your calling, encourage your faith, and participate in your purpose. When wrong voices convince you to prioritize relationships that enable your limitations over relationships that challenge your potential, you distance yourself from divine connections while growing closer to connections that keep you small. This relational damage shows up as conflict with people who speak truth into your life, distance from mentors who challenge your comfort zones, and preference for relationships that affirm your fears rather than strengthen your faith. You find yourself surrounded by people who support your status quo, rather than people who call you into your destiny. The seventh consequence of wrong trust is financial limitation that persists despite your efforts to improve your economic situation through human strategies alone. Wrong voices convince you to depend on earthly provision while neglecting heavenly supply, to trust in human resources while ignoring divine resources, to work harder instead of trusting deeper. This financial limitation manifests as cycles of lack that never break through to abundance, provision that barely meets needs without creating margin for generosity, and constant financial pressure that never resolves into the overflow I want to provide for your life and through your life to others. The eighth consequence is health challenges that persist because wrong voices have convinced you to trust in natural healing alone, while neglecting the supernatural healing power that flows through faith, prayer, and divine intervention. These voices limit your expectation of divine healing, reduce your prayer for miraculous restoration, and focus your hope entirely on medical solutions. This health limitation shows up as conditions that resist natural treatment, symptoms that persist despite medical intervention, and physical challenges that could be resolved through faith but remain unaddressed because wrong voices have convinced you that expecting divine healing is unrealistic or presumptuous. The ninth consequence of trusting wrong voices is purpose frustration that leaves you feeling unfulfilled, underutilized, and unable to make the impact you sense you were created to make. Wrong voices convince you to settle for jobs instead of pursuing calling, to choose security over significance, to prioritize comfort over contribution to my kingdom purposes. This purpose frustration manifests as chronic dissatisfaction with work that doesn't align with your calling, skills that remain unused because wrong voices counsel against risks necessary for platform development, and gifts that stay hidden because wrong voices prioritize safety over service. The most serious consequence of trusting wrong voices is the gradual erosion of intimate relationship with me. As other voices gain authority in your life, my voice becomes less familiar, my presence less real, and my guidance less recognizable. You find yourself more comfortable with human counsel than divine communion, more dependent on earthly wisdom than heavenly revelation. This relational erosion shows up as reduced time in prayer, decreased hunger for my presence, and increased reliance on human sources for direction, comfort, and validation. You still believe in me, but you no longer experience the intimacy that comes from trusting me completely, following me faithfully, and depending on me exclusively for life guidance. These consequences compound over time, creating cumulative damage that affects every area of your life. What began as occasional trust in wrong voices becomes habitual dependence on unreliable sources, creating a lifestyle of spiritual confusion, emotional anxiety, and perpetual frustration with results that never match the promises made by voices that lack authority to fulfill what they promise. But recognizing these consequences is the first step toward reversing them and returning to the peace, clarity, confidence, and breakthrough that come from trusting my voice alone. Every consequence of wrong trust can be reversed through right trust. Every result of misplaced confidence can be corrected through properly placed faith. The consequences you've experienced aren't permanent, my child. They're reversible through the simple but profound act of returning your complete trust to me, my voice, my guidance, and my unfailing love for your life. Come back to me and watch every consequence of wrong trust be replaced with the benefits of right trust. My beloved child, the time has come for you to learn how to recognize my voice with such clarity and confidence that you'll never again confuse it with the voices that have been misleading you, misdirecting you, and stealing your peace through deception disguised as wisdom. My voice has distinctive characteristics that set it apart from every other voice competing for your attention, and once you know these characteristics, you'll be able to distinguish my guidance from counterfeit counsel with absolute certainty. My voice always carries peace, even when it challenges you, corrects you, or calls you to difficult obedience. When I speak, there is an underlying current of deep soul rest that flows through the communication, regardless of what I'm asking you to do or where I'm calling you to go. This peace isn't the absence of challenge. It's the presence of my assurance that I will be with you, provide for you, and empower you for everything I ask of you. Wrong voices create anxiety, pressure, and internal tension, even when they're suggesting easy paths or comfortable choices. They generate stress about outcomes, worry about consequences, and fear about the future. But my voice brings calm to chaos, stillness to storms, and rest to restlessness. Even when I'm calling you to step outside your comfort zone, my voice carries the peace that passes understanding. My voice always aligns with my character as revealed in my word. I will never tell you to do anything that contradicts my nature of love, truth, holiness, mercy, and justice. I will never guide you toward actions that would damage your relationship with me, harm others without redemptive purpose, or lead you into patterns of behavior that contradict the righteousness I've placed within you through my Spirit. Wrong voices often suggest compromises that seem reasonable but violate my principles, shortcuts that seem efficient but lack integrity, or solutions that seem effective but require you to act in ways that contradict my character. My voice will always lead you along paths that honor my nature and reflect my heart, even when those paths require patience, sacrifice, or faith. My voice speaks identity and calling, not condemnation and shame. When I address areas of your life that need change, I do so from a foundation of unshakable love and unwavering commitment to your destiny. I speak correction as a loving father who wants to protect you from harm and prepare you for blessing, not as a judge who wants to punish you for failures or mistakes. Wrong voices specialize in condemnation that makes you feel worthless, shame that makes you want to hide from me, and guilt that makes you question whether you deserve my love and blessings. But my voice speaks your true identity as my beloved child, your divine calling as my chosen vessel, and your eternal value as someone I love unconditionally and completely. My voice creates faith and expectation, not doubt and discouragement. When I speak about your future, I generate hope about possibilities, confidence in my ability to provide and perform, and excitement about the plans I have to bless you and use you for kingdom purposes. My voice builds your faith by reminding you of my faithfulness, your hope by revealing my promises, and your expectation by confirming my love. Wrong voices create doubt about my goodness, discouragement about your future, and fear about whether things will work out for your benefit. They plant questions about my faithfulness, concerns about your worthiness, and uncertainty about whether my promises apply to your specific situation. But my voice builds unshakable confidence in my character and my commitment to your well-being. My voice brings clarity to confusion, not additional complexity to situations that are already overwhelming. When I speak, complex issues become simple, confusing circumstances become clear, and overwhelming decisions become obvious. I don't add layers of analysis, complications of consideration, or additional factors that make decisions more difficult. Wrong voices create confusion by offering too many options, generating endless analysis of possibilities, and introducing factors that complicate rather than clarify your decision-making process. They make simple situations complex and clear directions uncertain. But my voice cuts through confusion with clarity that brings immediate understanding and confident direction. My voice confirms what I've already been doing in your life, not contradicting previous guidance I've given you. I build upon previous revelation, expand on earlier direction, and develop themes I've already been weaving through your spiritual journey. My current communication will align with my historical work in your life, even when it takes you to new levels or in new directions. Wrong voices often contradict previous guidance I've given you, suggest that you misheard earlier direction, or imply that you need to abandon paths I've already confirmed. They create discontinuity in your spiritual journey rather than building upon the foundation I've already laid in your relationship with me. My voice creates hunger for my presence, not satisfaction with my absence. When I speak to you, it increases your desire for more communication, deeper relationship, and greater intimacy with me. My voice draws you closer to my heart, not further from my presence. It makes you want to spend more time with me, not less. Wrong voices often provide enough information to reduce your sense of need for continued fellowship with me. They satisfy your immediate questions without increasing your hunger for my presence. But my voice always leaves you wanting more communication, deeper understanding, and closer relationship with me. My voice speaks with authority that doesn't need to defend itself, prove itself, or convince you through manipulation or pressure. When I speak, there is an inner witness in your spirit that recognizes divine authority, even when your mind doesn't fully understand what I'm communicating. My voice carries the weight of truth that resonates in your spirit because you were created to recognize and respond to my communication. Wrong voices often use pressure, manipulation, or fear tactics to convince you to follow their guidance. They create urgency that demands immediate response without time for prayer, consideration, or confirmation. But my voice speaks with quiet authority that you recognize in your spirit as authentic divine communication. My voice brings unity to your inner life, aligning your spirit, soul, and body around my purposes for your life. When I speak, there is harmony between what your spirit senses, what your mind understands, and what your emotions feel. My voice creates internal integration rather than internal conflict. Wrong voices create internal division between what you sense in your spirit and what appeals to your flesh, between what you know is right and what seems convenient, between what builds faith and what satisfies immediate desires. But my voice brings all aspects of your being into alignment with my will and my ways. Learning to recognize my voice is not just an intellectual exercise. It's a relational skill that develops through time spent in my presence, through consistent exposure to my word, and through practice in distinguishing between my voice and other voices. The more time you spend with me, the more familiar my voice becomes, and the easier it is to recognize when other voices are trying to substitute their authority for mine. My voice is calling you back to me, my child. Not just back to believing in me, but back to intimate relationship where my voice is the most familiar, most trusted, and most influential voice in your life. Come back to me, and I will teach you to recognize my voice with such clarity that you'll never again be confused by counterfeits. My precious child, one of the most important distinctions you must learn to make is between my voice and the voice of fear, because fear is the most common imposter that masquerades as wisdom, protection, and practical guidance in your life. Fear speaks with such apparent authority and urgent concern that you often mistake its voice for mine. But I need you to understand that fear is never my voice, never my nature, and never my method of communication with my children. Fear speaks in the language of impossibility, constantly reminding you of all the reasons why things won't work out, why dreams won't come true, why breakthrough won't happen. It specializes in worst-case scenarios, disaster predictions, and failure projections. Fear's voice says, "What if you fail? What if you're rejected? What if you lose everything? What if people laugh at you? What if it doesn't work out the way you hope?" But my voice speaks in the language of possibility, reminding you that I am the God who makes ways where there are no ways, who brings life out of death, who creates something from nothing. My voice says, "I can do exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask or think. I have plans to give you hope and a future. With me, all things are possible. I will never leave you nor forsake you." Fear's voice creates anxiety about the future, filling your mind with worrisome projections about everything that might go wrong in days, weeks, months, or years to come. It makes you rehearse problems that haven't happened, practice responses to disasters that may never occur, and prepare for difficulties that exist only in imagination. Fear keeps you focused on future troubles rather than present faith. My voice brings peace about the future by reminding you that I hold your tomorrow in my hands, that I have already prepared the way before you, that I will provide everything you need for each day as it comes. My voice says, "Take no thought for tomorrow will take thought for itself. I will supply all your needs according to my riches in glory." Fear speaks through physical sensations of tension, anxiety, and panic that make your body feel stressed, your mind feel overwhelmed, and your emotions feel chaotic. Fear creates physical manifestations of worry, rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, muscle tension, sleeplessness, and digestive problems. Fear makes your body react as if threats are immediate even when they're only imaginary. My voice brings physical peace that calms your nervous system, slows your heart rate, deepens your breathing, and relaxes your muscles. When I speak, your body responds with rest because my presence carries healing, wholeness, and supernatural peace that affects every cell of your being. My voice brings physical symptoms of peace, not anxiety. Fear's voice grows louder during challenging circumstances, feeding on difficulties, amplifying problems, and using every obstacle as evidence that its warnings were correct. Fear gains strength from chaos, draws power from confusion, and becomes most persuasive when you're facing genuine challenges that require faith responses. My voice becomes clearer during challenging circumstances because trials create quiet spaces where you're more likely to listen carefully, seek me earnestly, and depend on me completely. I often speak most clearly during difficult seasons because your desperation creates spiritual receptivity, and your need creates focused attention on my communication. Fear speaks in absolutes that leave no room for divine intervention, miraculous breakthrough, or supernatural solutions. Fear's voice says, "This will never change. Nothing good ever happens to you. You'll never overcome this problem. This situation is hopeless. There's no way out." Fear sees only natural limitations and human impossibilities. My voice speaks in promises that transcend natural limitation and open possibilities that fear cannot perceive. My voice says, "I am making all things new. My mercy is new every morning. I am doing a new thing in your life. What seems impossible with man is possible with me. I see solutions that exist beyond fear's limited vision. Fear's voice demands immediate response without time for prayer, consideration, or confirmation. It creates artificial urgency that pressures you to act quickly before you have opportunity to seek my guidance, wait for my confirmation, or receive my peace about decisions. Fear says, "You must decide right now. You can't wait any longer. Time is running out." My voice gives you time to seek confirmation, wait for peace, and receive clear direction before making important decisions. Even when timing is important, my voice provides internal confidence and supernatural peace about the timing of your response. I don't rush you into decisions. I guide you into wisdom. Fear speaks condemnation about past mistakes, present struggles, and future possibilities. It reminds you of every failure, highlights every weakness, and predicts every potential disaster based on your history of human limitation. Fear's voice says, "You failed before, so you'll fail again. You're not strong enough. You're not smart enough. You don't deserve better." My voice speaks forgiveness about your past, strength for your present, and hope for your future. I remind you that my mercy is new every morning, that my strength is made perfect in your weakness, that I have plans to prosper you and not to harm you. My voice calls you beloved, chosen, and capable of all things through Christ who strengthens you. Fear's voice isolates you from relationships, making you suspicious of others' motives, doubtful of their love, and protective against potential hurt. Fear convinces you that people will disappoint you, betray you, or abandon you, so it's safer to maintain distance than risk intimacy. Fear builds walls around your heart disguised as wisdom. My voice draws you into healthy relationships, gives you discernment about people's character, and provides wisdom for appropriate vulnerability. I don't call you to naive trust, but I do call you to love that risks hurt for the possibility of blessing. My voice builds bridges of connection while providing wisdom for appropriate boundaries. Fear's voice questions my goodness, my faithfulness, and my love for you. It plants seeds of doubt about my character, my promises, and my commitment to your well-being. Fear suggests that maybe I don't care about your situation, that perhaps I've forgotten about you, that possibly I'm not as good as I claim to be. My voice confirms my character, my faithfulness, and my unchanging love for you. I remind you of my track record in your life, my promises in my word, and my demonstrated commitment to your growth, blessing, and ultimate good. My voice strengthens your confidence in my goodness, not weakens it. The key to distinguishing between fear's voice and my voice is learning to recognize the fruit each voice produces in your life. Fear produces anxiety, confusion, isolation, doubt, and paralysis. My voice produces peace, clarity, connection, faith, and confident action. When you hear a voice that creates fear, remember that it's not my voice, regardless of how reasonable it sounds or how much it claims to be protecting you. When you sense communication that brings peace, hope, faith, and love, you can trust that it aligns with my heart and my nature. I am calling you away from the torment of fear's voice, back to the peace of my voice. Fear has been masquerading as wisdom in your life, but true wisdom comes from me and always carries peace, not anxiety. Come back to my voice, my child, and let my perfect love cast out all fear that has been impersonating my guidance in your life. My beloved child, there is a tragedy happening in your spiritual life that breaks my heart and limits your potential. Human voices have become so loud, so frequent, and so influential that they're drowning out my divine whispers, making it nearly impossible for you to hear my gentle guidance above the cacophony of human opinion, advice, and direction. These human voices aren't necessarily evil or malicious, but they've gained such prominence in your decision-making process that my still small voice has been relegated to background noise in the symphony of your life. The human voices that have gained too much influence in your life speak with confidence about matters they don't fully understand, with authority over destinies they cannot see, and with certainty about futures they cannot predict. They offer counsel based on their limited experience, their cultural conditioning, and their natural understanding, but they lack the eternal perspective, divine revelation, and supernatural insight necessary to guide you into the fullness of what I have planned for your life. These human voices have become louder than my voice because you've given them permission to speak into every area of your life, to weigh in on every decision you make, and to influence every direction you consider. You've developed a pattern of seeking human counsel before seeking divine guidance, of asking people for advice before asking me for wisdom, of depending on earthly perspective before depending on heavenly revelation. The volume of human voices has increased because of your fear of making mistakes, your need for validation, and your desire for approval from people whose opinions you value. When facing important decisions, you automatically reach out to friends, family members, mentors, or advisors to gather their input, their perspective, and their recommendations. While seeking wise counsel isn't wrong, making human voices more authoritative than my voice creates spiritual confusion and misdirection. These human voices drown out my whispers through their frequency and urgency. People speak loudly and often about what they think you should do, where they believe you should go, and how they feel you should handle various situations. Their voices come through phone calls, text messages, social media posts, and face-to-face conversations that fill your mental and emotional space with their perspectives, leaving little room for the quiet communion where my voice is most clearly heard. Human voices also drown out divine whispers through their emotional intensity. When people care about you, their voices carry emotional weight that makes their counsel seem more important, more urgent, and more deserving of attention than my gentle guidance. Their worry becomes your worry, their fears become your concerns, their limitations become your boundaries, and their urgency becomes your pressure to make quick decisions without taking time to hear from me. The tragedy of human voices drowning out divine whispers is that people can only counsel you based on what they've seen, experienced, or learned through natural means. They cannot advise you about supernatural possibilities, divine interventions, or miraculous solutions that exist beyond their understanding or experience. Their counsel is limited by their history, their culture, and their human perspective on what's possible, practical, or probable. When human voices become too prominent, you begin to make decisions based on human wisdom rather than divine revelation, natural understanding rather than supernatural insight, earthly perspective rather than heavenly vision. You start filtering my calling through their comfort zones, measuring my promises against their experiences, and evaluating my direction through their limitations. These drowning voices also create internal conflict between what you sense in your spirit and what sounds reasonable to your mind. When my spirit whispers one direction but human voices counsel another, you experience confusion, uncertainty, and spiritual tension that makes it difficult to move forward with confidence. The conflict between divine whispers and human voices creates paralysis rather than faith-filled action. Human voices drown out my whispers, particularly in areas where my calling requires you to step beyond conventional wisdom, cultural norms, or family expectations. When I call you to paths that seem risky by human standards, unusual by cultural measures, or unrealistic by family tradition, human voices become especially loud in their attempts to redirect you towards safer, more conventional, more socially acceptable alternatives. The drowning effect is intensified when human voices speak with religious authority, using spiritual language to communicate human wisdom. When people quote scripture to support their natural reasoning, use prayer language to express their personal preferences, or claim spiritual insight to validate their earthly perspectives, their voices become even more difficult to distinguish from genuine divine communication. Human voices also drown out divine whispers by creating noise pollution in your spiritual environment. Constant exposure to human opinion, analysis, and advice fills your mental space with so much information, so many perspectives, and so many options that there's no quiet space left for the still small voice that requires silence, solitude, and spiritual sensitivity to be clearly heard. The drowning happens gradually as you become more comfortable with immediate human response than patient divine revelation. Human voices offer quick answers, while my voice often requires waiting, seeking, and listening. Human counsel provides instant analysis, while my guidance sometimes comes through process, prayer, and patient faith. The immediate availability of human voices makes them seem more practical than the divine whispers that require spiritual discipline to receive. When human voices drown out my whispers, you miss opportunities that were designed specifically for your calling, your timing, and your unique assignment. Human counsel can guide you toward good options, but only my voice can direct you toward the best options that align perfectly with your divine purpose, your spiritual gifts, and your eternal destiny. The solution to this drowning effect isn't to reject all human input, but to restore proper order, where my voice has supreme authority, and human voices serve as confirmation, not direction. It means seeking my guidance first, receiving my peace about direction, and then using wise human counsel to refine details rather than determine directions. I'm calling you back to the quiet place where my whispers are louder than human voices, where my peace is more compelling than human pressure, where my guidance is more authoritative than human advice. I'm inviting you to create spaces of silence where you can hear my still small voice above the noise of well-meaning people who love you but cannot see what I see for your future. Come back to the place where divine whispers have more influence than human voices, where my gentle guidance carries more weight than their loud counsel, where my quiet direction receives more attention than their urgent advice. My whispers contain your destiny, my child. Don't let human voices drown them out. My precious child, there is a voice that has been speaking to you for far too long, masquerading as spiritual truth but actually leading you away from the freedom I purchased for you and the intimate relationship I desire to have with you. This is the voice of performance, a demanding, exhausting, never satisfied voice that has convinced you that my love is conditional, my acceptance is earned, and my blessings are rewards for your good behavior. Today, I want to show you the stark difference between this voice of performance and my true voice of grace. The voice of performance speaks in the language of never enough, never good enough, never spiritual enough, never dedicated enough, never pure enough, never sacrificial enough. It constantly moves the goalposts of acceptability, making you feel like you're always falling short of some standard that determines whether you deserve my love, my attention, and my blessings. This voice creates a spiritual treadmill where you're always running, but never arriving at the destination of divine approval. Performance voice says, if you pray more, read more, serve more, give more, worship more, then maybe God will hear your prayers. If you can just be better, do better, try harder, then perhaps God will bless you. If you can eliminate all your struggles, overcome all your weaknesses, and perfect your spiritual life, then God will be pleased with you. But my voice of grace speaks in the language of already enough. You are already loved, already accepted, already blessed, already chosen, already approved. My grace voice says, you are my beloved child in whom I am well pleased, not because of what you do, but because of who you are to me. I love you completely, accept you unconditionally, and bless you abundantly because of my nature, not because of your performance. The voice of performance creates anxiety about your spiritual condition, making you constantly examine yourself for flaws, sins, and shortcomings that might disqualify you from my blessing. It makes you hyper-aware of your mistakes, obsessed with your failures, and tormented by your imperfections. This voice turns your attention inward toward self-evaluation, rather than upward toward my unchanging love. Performance voice generates fear that you might disappoint me, anger me, or lose my favor through some mistake, failure, or moment of weakness. It makes relationship with me feel precarious, uncertain, and dependent on your ability to maintain spiritual standards that this voice claims I require. This creates religious anxiety that robs you of the peace that comes from knowing my love is unconditional. My voice of grace creates confidence in your spiritual position, assuring you that your relationship with me is secured by my faithfulness. not your performance. Grace voice reminds you that you are the righteousness of God in Christ, that nothing can separate you from my love, that I see you through the lens of Jesus' perfection, not your imperfection. This creates spiritual rest and security. The voice of performance makes prayer feel like work, carefully structured, formally worded, lengthy petitions designed to convince me to hear you, help you, or bless you. It suggests that the effectiveness of your prayers depends on your spiritual condition, the eloquence of your words, or the intensity of your desperation. This voice makes prayer feel like performance for divine approval. But my voice of grace makes prayer feel like conversation with a loving Father, who delights in hearing from you regardless of how you feel, what you've done, or how articulate your words are. Grace voice invites you to come boldly to my throne, to cast all your cares on me, to commune with me as a beloved child rather than perform for me as a desperate stranger seeking favor. The voice of performance creates comparison with other believers, making you measure your spiritual life against their apparent spirituality, their visible blessings, their public testimonies. It makes you feel inferior when others seem more spiritual, more blessed, or more successful in their relationship with me. This comparison breeds envy, discouragement, and competitive spirituality. My voice of grace celebrates the unique relationship I have with each of my children, reminding you that my love for you is not diminished by my love for others, that your blessings are not limited by their blessings, that your calling is not threatened by their calling. Grace voice speaks your individual worth, your personal calling, and your specific place in my heart and my kingdom. The voice of performance makes worship conditional on your spiritual state, suggesting that you shouldn't worship when you're struggling, shouldn't sing when you're sad, shouldn't praise when you're going through difficulties. It makes worship feel like something you owe me when you're blessed, rather than something that connects you to me regardless of your circumstances. My voice of grace invites you to worship as a response to who I am, not as a payment for what I've done. Grace voice calls you to praise me in the storm, worship me in the valley, and sing to me in the darkness, because worship is about my character, not your circumstances. Worship becomes intimacy rather than obligation. The voice of performance interprets difficulties, delays, and challenges as evidence that I'm displeased with you, that you've done something wrong, or that you need to try harder to earn my favor. It makes every obstacle seem like punishment, every delay feel like rejection, and every challenge appear to be proof of spiritual inadequacy. But my voice of grace interprets difficulties as opportunities for my strength to be displayed, delays as divine timing for perfect outcomes, and challenges as platforms for my power to be demonstrated. Grace voice reminds you that I work all things together for good, that my plans for you are good, and that I'm using everything in your life for your ultimate benefit and my ultimate glory. The voice of performance creates spiritual exhaustion because it never allows you to rest in my acceptance, never permits you to be satisfied with my approval, never lets you enjoy the security of my unconditional love. It demands constant striving, perpetual improvement, and endless effort to maintain divine approval that it claims is always at risk. My voice of grace creates spiritual rest because it assures you that the work of salvation is finished, the price of acceptance is paid, and the foundation of your relationship with me is secure forever. Grace voice invites you to cease from your works and rest in my finished work, to stop striving and start receiving, to end performing and begin resting. The voice of performance makes sanctification feel like human effort to become holy through discipline, willpower, and religious activity. It places the burden of spiritual growth on your shoulders, making you responsible for transforming yourself into someone acceptable to me through your own spiritual work and dedication. My voice of grace makes sanctification feel like divine transformation that happens as you yield to my spirit, trust in my power, and rest in my ability to change you from the inside out. Grace voice reminds you that I am the author and finisher of your faith, that I who began a good work in you will complete it, that transformation is my work in you, not your work for me. I'm calling you away from the exhausting voice of performance back to the restful voice of grace. Performance has been masquerading as spirituality in your life, but true spirituality flows from grace, not works. True intimacy with me comes through grace, not performance. Come back to my voice of grace, my child, and let my unconditional love silence the demanding voice of performance that has been stealing your joy, your peace, and your confidence in my unfailing love for you. My beloved child, you are living in a culture that speaks with loud, persistent, and persuasive voices that directly contradict my kingdom voice, my eternal values, and the divine purposes I have for your life. These cultural voices have gained such influence that they're drowning out my kingdom voice, leading you to make decisions based on worldly wisdom rather than divine revelation, earthly values rather than heavenly principles, and temporal priorities rather than eternal purposes. The cultural voice of success speaks in the language of climbing ladders, accumulating wealth, gaining recognition, and achieving status by the world's standards. This voice measures your worth by your net worth, your value by your visibility, and your significance by your social standing. It convinces you that more is always better, that bigger is always superior, and that recognition is the ultimate validation of your life's value. But my kingdom voice speaks success in terms of faithfulness to calling, impact on others, character development, and eternal significance. My voice measures your worth by my love for you, your value by your identity in Christ, and your significance by your role in my eternal purposes. Kingdom success often looks like failure to cultural eyes, but produces rewards that last forever. The cultural voice of security promises safety through accumulation of resources, insurance against every possible risk, and control over circumstances that cannot actually be controlled. This voice creates anxiety about the future, obsession with financial planning, and dependence on earthly systems for peace of mind. It makes your security dependent on your ability to predict and prepare for every contingency. My kingdom voice speaks security through trust in my provision, confidence in my protection, and rest in my sovereignty over all circumstances. Kingdom security comes from knowing that I am your shepherd, and you shall not want, that I will supply all your needs according to my riches and glory, that nothing can touch your life without passing through my loving permission first. The cultural voice of identity tells you that you are what you do, what you own, what you achieve, or what others think about you. This voice makes your sense of self dependent on external validation, professional success, material possessions, or social acceptance. It creates identity crises when circumstances change, when achievements fade, or when people's opinions shift. My kingdom voice speaks identity based on my eternal love for you, your position as my child, and your calling as my representative on earth. Kingdom identity is unshakable because it's based on unchanging truth about who you are to me, not changing circumstances about what you do or have. You are beloved, chosen, called, and secure in my love forever. The cultural voice of timing demands immediate gratification, instant results, and quick solutions to problems that may require process, patience, and character development. This voice makes you impatient with my timing, dissatisfied with seasons of preparation, and tempted to take shortcuts that bypass the very experiences I'm using to prepare you for greater blessing. My kingdom voice speaks timing based on perfect preparation, optimal readiness, and ideal conditions for maximum impact and lasting results. Kingdom timing often seems slow by cultural standards, but produces outcomes that are more complete, more enduring, and more perfectly suited to your divine calling than anything human timing could achieve. The cultural voice of relationships prioritizes personal happiness, individual fulfillment, and self-serving connections over commitment, sacrifice, and other-serving love. This voice tells you to pursue relationships that make you feel good, Avoid commitments that require sacrifice and prioritize your comfort over others' needs. It creates shallow connections based on mutual benefit rather than covenantal love. My kingdom voice speaks relationships based on sacrificial love, committed service, and covenant faithfulness that reflects my love for you and my design for human connection. Kingdom relationships often require sacrifice, forgiveness, and selfless service, but they produce intimacy, trust, and lasting bonds that reflect my heart and bring glory to my name. The cultural voice of purpose encourages you to follow your passion, pursue your dreams, and create your own meaning through personal achievement and self-actualization. This voice makes purpose all about you, your happiness, your fulfillment, your success, your satisfaction. It disconnects purpose from my calling and makes it entirely dependent on your preferences and desires. My kingdom voice speaks purpose in terms of divine calling, eternal significance, and service to others that extends my kingdom and brings glory to my name. Kingdom purpose is bigger than personal fulfillment because it connects your life to eternal purposes that impact others, advance my kingdom, and create lasting change that outlives your earthly existence. The cultural voice of morality is relative, flexible, and constantly changing, based on popular opinion, social trends, and personal convenience. This voice tells you that right and wrong are determined by circumstances, that truth is whatever works for you, and that moral standards should adapt to cultural evolution and personal preference. But my kingdom voice speaks absolute moral truth, based on my unchanging character, eternal principles, and divine standards that transcend culture, time, and personal opinion. Kingdom morality provides solid foundation for life decisions, clear boundaries for behavior, and unwavering principles that protect you from the confusion and chaos of relative morality. The cultural voice of happiness promises that joy comes from external circumstances, material possessions, achievement of goals, and satisfaction of desires. This voice makes happiness dependent on things you cannot control, people who may disappoint you, and circumstances that constantly change. It creates an endless pursuit of happiness that never delivers lasting satisfaction. My kingdom voice speaks joy that comes from relationship with me, purpose in serving others, and peace that passes understanding regardless of external circumstances. Kingdom joy is independent of circumstances because it flows from my presence, my promises, and my eternal love that never changes, never fails, and never depends on external conditions. The cultural voice of power encourages you to gain influence through manipulation, control others through pressure, and advance yourself at others' expense. This voice makes power about dominance, control, and self-serving authority that uses others for personal advantage. It creates competition, conflict, and relationships based on who has more influence or control. My kingdom voice speaks power through service, influence through love, and authority through humility that serves others' best interests above your own. Kingdom power is power under authority, my authority, that uses influence to bless others, serve their needs, and advance my purposes rather than personal agendas. These cultural voices have gained influence in your life by promising quick results, easy solutions, and immediate satisfaction, but they cannot deliver the deep fulfillment, lasting peace, and eternal significance that your soul actually craves. They speak loudly but lead nowhere, promise much but deliver little, sound wise but lack divine wisdom. I'm calling you back from cultural voices to my kingdom voice, from worldly wisdom to divine revelation, from temporal values to eternal principles. The culture's voice will lead you to destinations that leave you empty, relationships that disappoint you, and achievements that don't satisfy the deepest longings of your heart. My kingdom voice leads to life abundant, relationships that reflect my love, and purposes that create lasting impact for eternity. Come back to my kingdom voice, my child, and let my eternal perspective replace the temporary wisdom of cultural voices. that promise everything but deliver nothing of lasting value. My precious child, there are seasons in life when everything around you becomes loud, chaotic, and overwhelming. When circumstances create storms of confusion, fear, and pressure that make it seem impossible to hear any voice of direction, wisdom, or hope. In these storms, many voices compete for your attention. The voice of panic screaming about immediate dangers, the voice of despair whispering that nothing will ever improve, the voice of anger demanding someone to blame for your difficulties. But in the midst of every storm, there is one voice that remains constant, clear, and reliable. My still small voice. My still small voice doesn't compete for your attention by being louder than the storm. It cuts through the noise by being different from the storm. While everything around you shouts with urgency, anxiety, and chaos, my voice whispers with peace, wisdom, and supernatural calm that can only come from the one who controls the storms, commands the winds, and speaks peace to the waves that threaten to overwhelm you. In the storm of financial crisis, many voices scream for your attention. The voice of panic tells you that you'll lose everything, that disaster is inevitable, that you should be afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The voice of pride tells you to hide your struggles, pretend everything is fine, and handle everything alone. The voice of desperation tells you to compromise your values, take shortcuts that violate your integrity, or make decisions based on fear rather than faith. But my still small voice whispers through the financial storm with words of provision, reminding you that I am your shepherd, and you shall not want, that I will supply all your needs according to my riches in glory, that I have never forsaken the righteous, or seen their children begging bread. My voice doesn't shout promises. It whispers assurance that creates peace in your heart, even when your circumstances haven't changed yet. In the storm of relationship crisis, voices of hurt scream accusations. Voices of rejection whisper lies about your worthiness of love, and voices of bitterness demand revenge against those who have wounded you. These voices create additional chaos in an already difficult situation, making healing harder and resolution more complicated. My still small voice whispers through relationship storms with words of healing, forgiveness, and restoration. I don't shout instructions. I gently guide you toward responses that reflect my heart, that create possibility for healing, and that protect your own soul from the poison of unforgiveness and bitterness. My voice leads you to love that heals, rather than hatred that hardens. In the storm of health crisis, the voice of fear screams about worst-case scenarios. The voice of despair whispers that nothing can help, and the voice of anger demands to know why this is happening to you. These voices create additional stress that complicates healing and makes suffering worse than it needs to be. But my still small voice whispers through health storms with words of healing, comfort, and supernatural peace that guards your heart and mind. My voice doesn't compete with medical opinions. It speaks divine possibilities that transcend medical limitations. I whisper hope when circumstances suggest despair, strength when weakness threatens to overwhelm, and peace that enables rest even in the midst of physical discomfort. In the storm of purpose confusion, voices of comparison tell you that everyone else has clear direction while you remain lost. Voices of discouragement whisper that you've missed your calling, and voices of pressure demand that you figure everything out immediately. These voices create anxiety about your future and make you feel behind, inadequate, or forgotten. My still small voice whispers through purpose storms with words of calling, timing, and divine direction that unfolds step by step rather than all at once. I don't shout your entire future. I whisper next steps that keep you moving forward in faith, even when you can't see the complete path. My voice creates confidence in my timing and trust in my guidance. The reason my voice remains small and still in storms is not because I lack power to speak loudly. I could silence every other voice and command your attention with thunderous authority. But I speak in whispers because intimacy requires quiet listening, because relationship develops through gentle communication, and because the most important truths are often received in stillness rather than shouting. My still small voice requires you to quiet your soul, silence the competing voices, and listen carefully for communication that comes through peace, not pressure, through love, not fear, through hope, not despair. Learning to hear my still small voice in storms requires developing spiritual sensitivity that can distinguish between the chaos of circumstances and the calm of my presence. The still small voice often comes through my written word that suddenly comes alive with personal application to your specific situation. A scripture you've read many times before suddenly speaks directly to your current storm with fresh revelation, perfect timing, and specific guidance that addresses your exact need. This is my voice speaking through my word to your heart. My still small voice also comes through the inner witness of my spirit that creates unexplainable peace about direction, supernatural confidence about decisions, and divine certainty about choices that don't make sense to natural understanding, but align perfectly with my purposes for your life. This inner knowing is my voice confirming my will in your spirit. Sometimes my still small voice comes through circumstances that open or close in ways that provide clear guidance without dramatic intervention. Doors that open with ease when you thought they would be difficult to access. Opportunities that appear just when you need them most. Or obstacles that prevent you from making mistakes you couldn't see coming. These are my voice speaking through providence. My still small voice may also come through other people, but when it does, it will always align with my word, create peace in your spirit, and confirm direction I've already been developing in your heart. True words from me through others don't contradict previous guidance I've given you. They confirm, clarify, or expand on what I've already been speaking to your heart. The key to hearing my still small voice in storms is learning to create quiet spaces in the midst of chaos, where you can listen for my gentle communication. This doesn't always mean finding physical quiet. Sometimes it means quieting your soul while the storm continues raging around you. It means turning your attention away from the voices of panic, fear, and despair toward the voice of peace, love, and hope. In every storm you face, my still small voice is speaking words of direction, comfort, wisdom, and hope. But you must choose to listen for my whisper, rather than be overwhelmed by the shouting of circumstances. You must train your spiritual ears to recognize my gentle guidance above the noise of crisis. The storm you're facing right now is not louder than my voice, more powerful than my presence, or more permanent than my promises. In the midst of whatever chaos surrounds your life, my still small voice is speaking peace, hope, direction, and love that will guide you through to the other side. Listen carefully, my child. In the quiet center of your heart, I am speaking. My still small voice is calling you through the storm to the peace that waits on the other side. My beloved child, after all these revelations about wrong voices, competing influences, and spiritual interference, my heart's cry is simple but urgent. Come back to my voice. Come back to the source of all truth, all wisdom, all love, and all direction. Come back to the voice that has known you since before you were born, that has called your name with love, and that has never spoken a word over your life that wasn't designed for your ultimate good and my eternal glory. Coming back to my voice means more than just acknowledging that you've been listening to other voices. It means making a conscious, intentional, wholehearted decision to give my voice supreme authority in every area of your life, every decision you make, and every direction you choose to follow. It means dethroning every other voice that has gained unauthorized influence and re-establishing my voice as the ultimate authority over your thoughts, your choices, and your future. Coming back to my voice requires repentance, not just feeling sorry for listening to wrong voices, but actually turning away from dependence on human wisdom, cultural values, fearful projections, and performance-based thinking, and turning back to complete dependence on my wisdom, my values, my promises, and my grace. Repentance is a change of mind that leads to a change of direction. This return involves acknowledging that other voices have led you away from my best for your life, have created confusion where I intended clarity, have generated fear where I wanted to give faith, and have produced anxiety where I designed peace. It means admitting that trusting wrong voices has cost you opportunities, delayed your breakthrough, and complicated your relationship with me. Coming back to my voice means returning to intimate communion, where my voice becomes more familiar than any other voice, more trusted than any other counsel, more influential than any other authority. This intimacy develops through regular time in my presence, consistent meditation on my word, and continuous conversation through prayer that goes beyond asking for things to simply enjoying relationship with me. The return requires you to create space in your life for my voice to be heard clearly, loudly, and frequently. This means reducing the noise of constant connectivity, limiting exposure to voices that contradict my truth, and establishing rhythms of silence, solitude, and spiritual focus where my still small voice can communicate with your spirit without competition from other influences. Coming back to my voice involves learning to recognize my communication with such clarity that you can immediately distinguish my voice from every imposter, every counterfeit, and every substitute that tries to speak into your life. This discernment develops through experience with my voice, familiarity with my character, and consistent exposure to my truth through scripture, prayer, and worship. The return means making my approval more important than human approval, my direction more compelling than human advice, my timing more trustworthy than human urgency, and my peace more valuable than human understanding. It means measuring every other voice against my voice and rejecting anything that contradicts my character, my promises, or my purposes for your life. Coming back to my voice requires courage because my voice often calls you to paths that seem risky to human understanding, directions that appear unusual to cultural standards, and decisions that don't make sense to natural reasoning. My voice calls you to trust in the unseen, hope in the impossible, and act on faith rather than sight. This return involves developing what I call voice loyalty, an unwavering commitment to follow my voice regardless of what other voices say, regardless of what circumstances suggest, regardless of what fears whisper, and regardless of what human wisdom counsels. Voice loyalty means that my voice gets the final word in every situation, every decision, and every direction. Coming back to my voice means returning to the place where my love is more real to you than any rejection you've experienced, where my acceptance is more meaningful than any human approval you've received, where my promises are more reliable than any human guarantee you've been given. It means letting my voice of love silence every voice of condemnation, shame, and unworthiness. The return requires you to trust my voice even when it leads through valleys, even when it requires waiting, even when it demands faith for what you cannot see or understand. My voice will always lead you to places of greater blessing, deeper character, and more significant impact. But the path may not always be comfortable, convenient, or comprehensible to human reasoning. Coming back to my voice involves surrendering your need to understand everything before you obey, to see everything before you believe, to control everything before you trust. My voice often asks you to step forward in faith, to move without complete information, to trust my heart when you cannot see my hand. This return means making my voice the first voice you seek in every situation, not the last voice you consider after exhausting human options. Means starting with prayer before proceeding with planning, beginning with worship before engaging with worry, commencing with scripture before consulting with human sources. Coming back to my voice requires you to disconnect from voices that have been feeding you lies about your identity, your worth, your future, and my heart toward you. This disconnection isn't necessarily about ending relationships, but it is about ending the authority those voices have had to shape your thoughts, influence your emotions, and direct your decisions. The return involves reconnecting with my voice through fresh encounters in worship, new revelations in my word, and renewed intimacy in prayer. It means approaching me with expectation that I want to communicate with you, that I have direction for your life, that I have love to pour out over every wound that wrong voices have created in your heart. Coming back to my voice is not a one-time decision, but a daily choice, a moment-by-moment commitment, a lifetime journey of giving my voice increasing authority and influence in every aspect of your life. It's a process of learning to hear me more clearly, trust me more completely, and follow me more faithfully with each passing day. The invitation to come back to my voice is an invitation to come home to the relationship we were always meant to have, home to the intimacy I've always desired with you, home to the security of knowing that the voice you're following is the voice of perfect love, infinite wisdom, and unchanging faithfulness. I am calling you back, my child. Back to my voice, back to my heart, back to my love. Every wrong voice that has gained influence in your life is being silenced by my call. Every competing authority is being overruled by my supremacy. Every substitute source of guidance is being replaced by my authentic direction. Come back to my voice, and I will lead you into the fullness of everything I have prepared for your life, your relationships, your purpose, and your future. Come back to the voice that has never failed you, never misled you, and never spoken anything but truth and love over your destiny. Come back to me. My voice is calling you home. My precious child, as we reach the culmination of this divine conversation about voices, direction, and trust, I want you to understand the ultimate purpose of why I'm calling you back to my voice. It's because my voice always leads you home. Not just to a physical location, but to the spiritual, emotional, and relational home your soul has been searching for throughout your entire journey. Every wrong voice you've trusted has led you away from home, but my voice will always guide you back to the place where you belong, where you're loved, and where you're destined to flourish. Home, in its truest sense, is not a building or a location, it's a relationship. It's the intimate connection between your heart and mine, the perfect alignment between your will and my will, the sweet harmony between your desires and my purposes for your life. When you follow my voice, you're not just receiving direction for your circumstances. You're being led into deeper intimacy with me, closer relationship with my heart, and fuller understanding of my love for you. My voice leads you home to identity, to the truth of who you really are as my beloved child, my chosen vessel, my treasured possession. Wrong voices have been telling you that you're defined by your performance, your achievements, your failures, or other people's opinions about you. But my voice speaks your true identity. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, created for good works, called with a holy calling, and loved with an everlasting love. When you come home to your identity in me, you stop striving for acceptance and start resting in approval that's already yours. You stop performing for love and start receiving love that's already been given. You stop working to become worthy and start walking in worthiness that's already been established through my grace and my goodness toward you. My voice leads you home to purpose, to the unique calling I placed on your life before the foundation of the world, to the specific assignment that gives your existence meaning, significance, and eternal impact. Wrong voices have convinced you to pursue purposes that don't fit your divine design, to chase callings that don't align with your spiritual gifts, to invest your life in activities that don't connect to your eternal destiny. When you come home to your purpose in me, you discover work that doesn't feel like work because it flows from your true nature. You find service that energizes rather than exhausts because it aligns with how I created you. You experience impact that multiplies because it connects to my kingdom purposes rather than human ambitions. My voice leads you home to peace, to the supernatural rest that passes understanding, that guards your heart and mind regardless of external circumstances, that enables you to sleep soundly even when storms rage around your life. Wrong voices have created anxiety, worry, and fear that have robbed you of the peace I purchased for you and intended you to enjoy. When you come home to peace through my voice, you discover that your security isn't dependent on your circumstances, but on my character. Your confidence isn't based on your ability to control outcomes, but on my sovereignty over all situations. Your rest isn't contingent on having all the answers, but on trusting the one who knows all the answers and works all things together for your good. My voice leads you home to provision, to the abundant supply that flows from my unlimited resources, to the supernatural provision that transcends natural limitation, to the overflow blessing that enables generosity and creates impact beyond your immediate needs. Wrong voices have kept you focused on scarcity, lack, and limitation that contradict my nature as your provider. When you come home to provision through my voice, you discover that I am indeed your shepherd, and you shall not want. You learn that my resources are not limited by earthly economics, that my supply is not restricted by natural circumstances, that my ability to provide is not hindered by anything you can see or understand. My voice leads you home to relationships, to connections that reflect my love, partnerships that support your calling, and intimacy that heals the wounds wrong voices have created through rejection, betrayal, and abandonment. Wrong voices have convinced you that you're unlovable, that relationships always end in disappointment, that it's safer to guard your heart than risk intimacy. When you come home to relationship through my voice, you discover love that never fails, acceptance that never wavers, and commitment that never changes. You learn to give and receive love from a place of wholeness rather than neediness, to connect with others from security rather than insecurity, to trust from faith rather than fear. My voice leads you home to wholeness, to the integration of spirit, soul, and body that creates harmony in your inner life, health in your physical being, and vitality in your spiritual existence. Wrong voices have created division within you, making you feel fragmented, conflicted, and internally at war with yourself. When you come home to wholeness through my voice, you experience alignment between what you believe, what you feel, and what you do. Your inner life becomes unified around my purposes. Your physical health improves as spiritual health is restored. Your emotional life stabilizes as you learn to process feelings through my truth rather than through fear-based interpretations. My voice leads you home to freedom, to liberation from every form of bondage that wrong voices have created through fear, shame, guilt, performance, comparison, and striving. Wrong voices have built prisons of limitation around your mind, your emotions, and your expectations about what's possible for your life. When you come home to freedom through my voice, you discover that whom the sun sets free is free indeed. You learn that my truth sets you free from lies that have bound you, that my love sets you free from fear that has controlled you, that my grace sets you free from performance that has exhausted you. My voice leads you home to hope, to confident expectation of good things, to unshakable faith in my goodness, to trust in my promises that creates joy even in difficult circumstances. Wrong voices have filled you with discouragement, disappointment, and despair about your future. When you come home to hope through my voice, you discover that your hope is not based on changing circumstances, but on my unchanging character. Your expectation is not dependent on what you can see, but on what I have promised. Your joy is not contingent on external conditions, but on internal confidence in my love and faithfulness. My voice leads you home to legacy, to the generational impact of a life lived in alignment with my purposes, to the eternal significance of decisions made from my wisdom, to the lasting influence of a person who learned to distinguish my voice from all competing voices and chose to follow me completely. When you come home to legacy through my voice, you realize that your life matters beyond your lifetime, that your choices affect generations you'll never meet, that your faithfulness to my voice creates ripple effects that extend into eternity. The journey home through my voice is not just about returning to where you started. It's about arriving at where you were always meant to be. It's about becoming who you were always created to become. It's about fulfilling what you were always destined to fulfill. It's about experiencing the love you were always meant to experience. Every step you take in response to my voice is a step toward home. Every decision you make based on my direction is a choice that leads to deeper intimacy with me. Every moment you spend listening for my communication is a moment invested in the relationship that will satisfy every longing of your heart. I am calling you home, my beloved child. Home to my voice, home to my heart, home to my love. The journey begins with a single decision to trust my voice above all other voices, to follow my direction despite all other options, to believe my promises regardless of all other circumstances. My voice is calling you home, and home is where you belong, where you're loved, and where you'll find everything your heart has been searching for. Come home to my voice, and let me lead you into the fullness of everything I have prepared for you. The door is open, the light is on, and I am waiting with arms open wide to welcome you home. Your journey home begins with listening to my voice. Start now. Come home.